To Chapter 11, Marketing, Building Profitable Customer Connections. As we go through this latest chapter in our class, we're going to be taking a look at what marketing is and how that influences the role of business in targeting getting their products to the customer. We will look at the objectives, the process, and the scope of marketing, identify the role of the customer in marketing, explain each element of marketing strategies, describe the consumer and business decision-making process, discuss the key elements of marketing research, and finally explain the roles of social responsibility and technology in marketing. So what is marketing? The American Marketing Association defines marketing as the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, for clients, partners, and society at large. Long-term profitability is the ultimate objective of marketing, and that aligns, obviously with the long-term objective of a for-profit company. This objective can only be met when value is delivered to customers and to other stakeholders within the organization. So the big picture of marketing, it's the ability of goods and services to satisfy consumer wants. And that is done through what we call different utilities. So the form utility satisfies wants by converting inputs into a finished form. There is the time utility that satisfies wants by providing goods and services at a convenient time for customers. We have the place utility, which satisfies wants by providing goods and services at a convenient place for customers. And finally, there is the ownership utility, and this satisfies wants by smoothly transferring ownership of goods and services from seller to buyer. Now, within the scope of marketing, we see once again we have our nonprofit organizations who use marketing as a tool to achieve their goals. In the nonprofit organization, the role of the economy is used by employing more people than the government. So nonprofit organizations are looking at a wide range of people, a wide range of places, events, and ideas. Now, on the opposite hand, we have for-profit organizations, and they use free market tactics and strategies that are beyond just simple goods and services. There's people marketing. Some examples of that are sports, politics. We see lots of politics being advertised all the time in this country now. But we also have place marketing that involves attracting people to come to a particular spot. For example, somebody traveling to Oregon would receive travel brochures on visiting the Columbia River Gorge and seeing the Multnomah Falls. So that's an example of place marketing. We have event marketing that includes sponsoring athletic, cultural, or charitable events. And then in idea marketing, this is a whole range of public and private organizations that market ideas that are meant to change how people think or act. You can see some examples of this in caring for the homeless or giving back to taking care of global warming. So these are all ideas that we receive marketing information about. Now this slide shows the evolution of marketing and how there are many overlaps that have taken place over the years. So at the bottom we have production focus. This was really when marketing was created, and products were created and consumers were convinced that they needed that product. You then have the selling focus that came about a short time later, where businesses are really strong-arming people to buy their products through very aggressive salespeople. Then you have marketing focus, and this is where especially large businesses, and I'm thinking of Procter & Gamble, I'm thinking of Pepsi, Coca-Cola, where they are collecting information about their client and figuring out how to get their products messaged to the customers so that they are purchasing their products and purchasing more of it. And beginning in the 1990s, we really have the relationship focus of marketing, where instead of going after new customers, the goal of marketing has shifted a little bit and is looking to build and maintain that relationship with that customer. And in turn, that customer, once you're happy, you then share that news with your friends, your family, other business associates, and new customers are gleaned that way. Now, with customer and marketing, the most important aspect of this is, the value of relationship and having that customer relationship. It's an ongoing process which involves acquiring the relationship, maintaining the relationship, and growing profitable customer relationships over time. So when we break this down a little bit more, we have limited relationships that depend on gathering data, and it really depends on the type of industry. There's full partnerships where we have high-ticket items, but maybe a small customer base. We see that in sports marketing right now, in the Super Bowl. That's become a very big corporate event. It's a high-ticket product, and fewer people are able to afford that. And then value. This is where customers perceive that the product has a better relationship than its competitors between the cost and benefits. That might be the difference between Sprint and Verizon, or an iPhone over a Droid. Now, perceived value versus actual value. So customers need to be convinced that a product is uniquely qualified to meet their needs. And this is very difficult with a new business, especially when the new business is competing against a market leader. Looking at the cell phone business or market. If you are an iPhone user, you're probably pretty loyal to the iPhone company. And if Acme phones were to make a new phone that had even more bells and whistles than the iPhone, you would be very hard pressed to switch because of the loyalty that you have to Apple and the products that they make. Let's see, continuing on. So we have customer satisfaction and loyalty. When products are able to deliver their perceived value above or beyond the customer's expectations, it leads to great customer satisfaction. And achieving this satisfaction is tricky, and less savvy marketers tend to fall into two traps. They either overpromise what the product can do or they underpromise. They don't fully talk up their product that they should be talking up. Customer loyalty is the payoff for delivering value and generating satisfaction. A loyal customer is one that buys the product repeatedly and will forgive mistakes and is even willing to provide valuable feedback so that the manufacturer can improve on the product, and they'll be right there purchasing the product the next time. Now, with any successful marketing strategy, the goal is to identify your target audience and to find a way of reaching out to them. This is done in the marketing plan. And the marketing plan is a formal document that clearly defines what your goals and strategies are and how you're going to meet those objectives. Once that target market has been identified, the next step is to determine how you can best use marketing tools to reach them. So how do you find your potential customers? And customers can be divided into different groups so that if you have a phone that somebody in their teens or 20s is interested in, well, certainly somebody in their 50s would be interested in it also, but the marketing message for those two consumers would be very different. And then finally, after you've segmented your market, you look at your target market. And this particular group of people, they are the ones who are most likely to buy your product. The characteristics of a well-chosen target market are size, profitability, accessibility, and limited competition. So the difference between a consumer market and a business market, in a consumer market, marketers will direct their efforts towards people who are buying products for personal consumption, whereas business marketers, they will direct their efforts towards people who are buying the products to either use directly or possibly indirectly. Either way, a good marketer will be able to identify the difference between these two buyers and really change or adjust their message so that it's fitting for both. One example of a business marketer is PepsiCo. So Pepsi is going to sell their product directly to a retail organization such as Fred Meyer. And the information that they will be giving their Fred Meyer buyers, they talk about profitability, they talk about market share and projected sales. Well, Pepsi, while they're providing this information to Fred Meyer, they also have a consumer marketing plan. So you will see ads, you will see sponsorship, like one of the skateboarders, the Mountain Dew, there's a big skateboarding competition that travels around the country that is sponsored by PepsiCo through Mountain Dew. They will run or come to agreements with Fred Meyer to sell their Pepsi products at a reduced price that Fred Meyer will then advertise in their weekly ad. So this is a big example of how consumer markets and business markets are different, but they also work very, very closely together. Now, when we're looking at consumer market segmentation, you really need to understand where your product is going, who your target market is. So first you have to divide your prospective customers into groups based on similarities. Since people can be similar in a number of different ways, it's not surprising that marketers have several options for segmenting these potential consumers. So some of the market segments include demographic segmentation, so dividing the market into smaller groups based on measurable characteristics about people. Dividing people by where they live, geography. Consumers that live on the West Coast will buy different products than people that are from the Midwest. We have this psychographic segmentation. So this is targeting people based on their attitudes, their interests, their values, their lifestyles. And finally, we have behavioral segmentation, which is dividing the market based on how people behave towards various products. Now, business market segmentation it's similar, but it's different. So again, this is looking to sell to businesses that will in turn either use your product or sell it themselves. So this can be divided up by geography. This can be customer based, so dividing the market based on the characteristics of the customers. And then product use based, dividing the market based on how customers will use the product. So an example, going back to our Fred Meyer example, if you have a Fred Meyer buyer and a New Seasons buyer, they're going to be looking at different types of products based on how they're marketing their own business. And so if I'm selling lotion, I'm going to take a certain type of lotion brand to New Seasons and completely different product probably to Fred Meyer. Now we have the marketing mix. Now these are 4 basic categories that marketing really analyzes very carefully when they are looking at their products. You have your product strategy. What products are you going to have? You have your pricing strategy. Are you going to be an expensive elite brand? Are you going to be the cheap generic type of brand? Distribution. How are you going to get your product to the consumer? And finally, how are you going to promote your product? How do you get the word out to the consumer or to the business about your product and what a great product is? So let's take a look at these 3 ads. We have 3 different companies. Who do you think is the target audience for each of these cars? We have the Maserati. We have a Toyota. And we have a Mini. Mini's in the middle. So all of these companies really were selling cars, and the cars help to move people from point A to point B. But what separates them? For the Maserati, you have a very expensive, high-end vehicle that gives an image of prosperity, and you're pretty cool driving around in a sleek-looking convertible. The Mini, it is being promoted as, gosh, just a fun little car. Everybody wants to get into it. You're going to have a good time. There's lots of relationships going on there. So it's a car meant for good families. And then you have your Toyota. that is leading edge. It is the Prius is addressing global warming. So we are taking care of our environment. We get great gas mileage, energy efficiency. So we are doing all of that because we care about our future. So 3 cars, they move people just as efficiently from point A to point B, but a very, very different strategy. Now, in the marketing environment, marketers have to anticipate and respond to elements that are beyond their control. And they're always paying attention to this, and they try to anticipate correctly and to respond appropriately. And they do that by always scanning their environment. And that is the process of continually collecting information from the external marketing environment. And this is a real challenge. And especially because marketers do not always have control. Is the price of sugar going up because there was a drought in the southern part of the United States? So the sugar cane didn't grow. How is that going to influence the production of a can of soda pop, for example? So you always have to pay attention and look beyond. So some other key elements of the external environment, we have the competitive environment, which is, what are your competitors doing? Are they getting some of your customers, or are you getting theirs? Always watching market share. Economic, identifying and responding to changes as soon as possible. Social and cultural. When there are rapid changes in trends, this can impact marketing decisions. Technological. This definitely affects marketers, but in ways that are less visible. But the speed with which we can communicate by text, the use of social media, it doesn't take much for somebody famous to make a tweet either for a product or against a product, and that can have huge effects on a business. And then, of course, you have the political and legal environment, and that influences marketing based on the type of government that is currently in place. Is it a more liberal government or a more conservative government? And that can influence how you're able to get your product out there. Now, a growing segment, and we've talked a lot about this throughout this class so far, but it's the global marketing environment. And what's interesting is the internet has made markets all over the world accessible to consumers. Well, that is both a huge bonus, but it's also, it's a challenging, it provides a challenge because you have to understand the differences between selling a product in Indonesia versus one in Latin America. There are social and cultural norms that savvy marketers need to be aware of so that you are indeed being able to get your product to those end consumers. Now, consumer behavior. This is basically how people behave when they're buying, using, and getting rid of products for personal consumption. Sometimes it is completely spontaneous. You decide that you're tired of this computer. You want a new one, and you go out and you purchase one. You may be guided by something breaking. Maybe your refrigerator is 20 years old and it dies. Well, you have to go get a refrigerator. So marketing can influence the purchase decision every step of the way, from helping consumers to identify their needs or problems, or helping them to resolve that awful feeling of what is called cognitive dissonance after a big purchase. And what cognitive dissonance is, it's after you've made a big purchase, such as a car, a home, something that is very expensive. It is very common for consumers to really question, did I make the right decision? And marketers attempt to avoid this dissonance by developing programs that help customers to validate their choices. And they do that so that you are satisfied and you do not leave that when you go home, you're happy with your purchase. You're not wondering, what did I do? So elements that influence the consumer decision-making process, and I'm not going to read this word for word, but you have cultural influences, and that those values and attitudes, they're shaped by the society that you're growing up in. You have your social influence, your family, friends, other reference groups. You have your personal influences, how old you are, your gender, how much money you make. And finally, you have your psychological. What motivates you? What attitudes do you have? How do you perceive a product? And what about learning? And how we learn does influence our decision making. So the decision-making process, this slide shows how different elements can influence the consumer's decision-making process. And in this example, your best friend, under need recognition, your best friend notices that she's the only person she knows who still wears high-rise blue jeans to class. Uh-oh, fashion problem alert. So what she does, because she's horrified, she goes and she researches not only your personal style, but she starts looking in fashion magazines. And then she begins to evaluate her alternatives. How much are jeans? How much are they at Macy's? How much at Nordstrom's? How much at Penny's or Fred Meyer's? And after she's talked to quite a few people, she decides to buy a brand, and they're $215. Well, after spending $215 for a pair of jeans, she begins to really chastise herself. And she does that because all of a sudden she has no money. She spent it all on jeans, and she can't afford to go out anymore. She used to enjoy Starbucks, and for a while that's just off the table. She can't do it. So that's that's an example of how a person can go about deciding to make a purchase, and how at the end of it there can be some cognitive dissonance in the post-purchase behavior. Now, the business buyer behavior, this describes how people behave when they're making decisions to buy products either used directly or indirectly. So many of these buyers, they are trained specifically to make purchases. There's usually some rationale or some criteria that they use to make their decision, and this decision making or this purchasing is done according to certain specifications and objective standards that their company has set for them. Now, marketing research. This is a huge, huge field. And marketing research, what it is, it's the process of gathering, interpreting, and applying information about consumer purchase patterns, about business trends. It's used to identify external opportunities and possible business threats. It's also used to monitor and predict customer behavior, and it's used to evaluate and improve the marketing mix. So if you haven't done any promotion lately and sales are starting to decline, as you research that, you might say, oh, we need to get back to supporting our product again. So there's two primary sources for research data. We have secondary data that is available, and then we also have primary data. So secondary data uses its existing data that marketers can gather. It tends to be pretty cheap and easy to get. Because it's broader, it may not meet your needs. And a lot of times by the time you get it, it's old. So it's somewhat irrelevant, and everybody's got it. So some examples of this are the US Census, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, any industry-related publications. Now, primary data is data that's collected for the first time. It's very expensive to do, but you can customize it to your own needs, and it's very fresh. And most importantly, it's proprietary. Nobody has it. So this data comes from your own surveys, focus groups, customer comments, mail interviews or mall interviews, telephone surveys. These are all examples of primary data. So observation research. So these are a couple of categories of primary research tools. So in observation research, you are observing people's actions. And what's nice about that is you can see how what people do may or may not differ from what they say. Sometimes people are inaccurate. Sometimes they just flat out lie. You're able to discern some of the differences during observation research. And then survey research. This requires the researcher to interact with the research subject. So you get information about what people are thinking and feeling. And a lot of times, I know several times a week I'm called by different survey companies and asking me for information. So they're trying to get me to interact with them so I can give them, my opinion. Now, social responsibility and technology are really new focus areas that are causing a big shift within marketing. So while social responsibility has been around for generations, it's really become a pretty hot topic probably within the last 10 years. And of course, technology continues to change and evolve at an even faster pace. So the social responsibility movement have had a considerable impact on marketing in the last few decades. So marketers are expected to contribute to the needs of the broader community. You have leading edge marketers that have responded by setting a high standard in key areas. I'm thinking right now of Yoplait Yogurt that has partnered with the Susan B. Komen Race for the Cure, and they're very involved in helping to raise awareness and to raise money for cancer research. And then, of course, you have that shift in technology where customers they can get their products quickly, easily, they can share information about those products, and this is happening faster and faster, where we can take a cell phone, for example. Two people can have the same phone, and we can customize it so that it is meeting the different needs of each person. And that is something that's new, that 20 years ago you didn't have the ability to customize your own products quite so much. So as we look back at marketing, and again, this is just touching the surface of it. We've discussed the objectives, the process, and the scope of marketing while identifying the role of the customer in marketing. Let's see, I explained each element of marketing strategy and included a description of the consumer and business decision-making process and how they're the same and how they're different. We've taken a very brief look at some of the key elements of marketing research and then explained the roles of social responsibility and technology in marketing. This concludes Chapter 11. And I would like you to go to Buzz to see what this week's assignments are. There's certainly a quiz, and as we're getting closer and closer to the end of the class, it's really time to be getting prepared for your second midterm and pretty soon the final. So, as usual, if you have any questions, please contact me, and I will definitely be there to help you out. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.